Everybody, welcome to the video. It's Tuesday, May 18th. We're breaking down this massive 14-game slate that we have over on DraftKings today. It's a big slate, so there's a lot of ways we can go, lots of pitching options, lots of bats we can pick from, so it should be a good one. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. If you'll follow me over on social media, you're able to find me in the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon and get access to some extra content, not just these few players I do talk about on the screen, link is down below for that. If you do want to join the community, I have several hundred people over there. You get projections, my optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets. You can build stacks. I got my ownership projections on there, Discord community, all that fun stuff. Link is down below for that. I have all the stats you'd ever want on this spreadsheet. So I think that's kind of it for the plugs, though. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. As per usual, we will start with the pitchers, then move on to the bats. And there's other viable pitchers and the guys I have listed here. There's a couple guys I wanted to put on here, but I didn't want to talk about 10 pitchers because that would take forever. So these are the ones I'm kind of wanted to talk about for the most part. Maybe Patrick Corbin and Chris Bubic are my favorite plays in the world, but I do think they're decent talking points for today's slate. But we'll talk about them when we get there. So we'll start up top with the ace, Brandon Woodruff, $10,200. Zach Wheeler is also on this slate, going up against Miami. I think he's another viable option as well. But if I had to pick between the two, I am going to prefer Woodruff because he does offer us a little bit more strikeout upside. Plus, the past two games, he has been flawless. I think it was versus Philly, and I forget the team he played last week. It was either the Cubs or the Cardinals, but I'm thinking it was the Cardinals. But either way, he's been great this year, and so we got a 3.18 implied team total against him, 8K prop, and a 64% chance for the dub over in Vegas. And dating back to last season, his numbers have been really good. Ace level stuff. 32% K rate, 3.14 Sierra, 3.05 xFIP, 2.49 ERA, about 97 on his fastball. This is a 123 inning sample size, and not giving up any power, low batting average, ground balls, not a lot of home runs. So he pretty much checks every single box for me. I do like Brandon Woodruff here. Now the matchup versus the Royals, I wouldn't say it's the most cakewalk matchup in the world. They're only striking out at a 23.5% clip, 97 WRC plus, and some actually decent numbers here. But Brandon Woodruff, as I always say in my videos, if you guys have been watching them all year, that I always prefer elite level pitching over whatever matchup they are facing because they can overcome that most of the time. So I do like Brandon Woodruff here quite a bit. If you are spending top dollar for a pitcher today, although I think most people, if they're not using Brandon Woodruff, they're probably just going to slide in Blake Snell here at $8,900. I'd have to imagine he'll be the highest owned pitcher on the slate because you can always attack the Rockies away from Coors Field because their offense is absolute mush outside of Coors, and Petco Park is definitely a pitcher-friendly park here, and they're the lowest implied team total on the slate currently, and I can't see any other team being lower than that for the ones that don't have totals out yet. But it's only at 2.83 right now. It's a pretty heavy favorite, 6.5K prop as well. And Blake Snell below $9,000 just seems a bit too cheap. So I'm going to imagine he is your chalky cash pitcher today, which should be the highest owned pitcher on the slate. And he's got good strikeout stuff. He will walk some guys, which can be a bit of an issue. 4.5 walks per 9, but 12 Ks per 9 is pretty good. Close to a 12% walk rate with that 31% K rate. Like, if he was the same price as Woodruff, I would prefer Woodruff, but since you're getting like a, $1,300 discount here, it just makes me want to go with Blake Snell because I love this matchup versus the Rockies. Now, so far this season, they have been better versus lefties compared to righties, but even then, I'm not overly concerned about it. Blake Snell should be a pretty rock-solid play today, and I would go with him in cash games to start out my pitchers. If you can get the Brandon Woodruff as your SP1 instead of Blake Snell, I think that's fine. I'd like to play the two together. It's just going to be a matter of being able to afford them. There's plenty of value bats once again because it's a monster slates. There's always going to be value bats on these huge slates, but I'm just not sure if you're going to want to go super top dollar pitcher day because I think there's some okay cheap options which you could go with, but it might be a little bit risky for a cash game. So if you want to feel nice and secure with your pitchers today, probably lock up close to 60 points between the two. Woodruff and Snell are your guys. Then getting into some of the riskier SP2 options, we have guys like Andrew Heaney and Jameson Taillon. And then if you want to get really risky, we have Patrick Corbin, and then Chris Bubic's even probably riskier than Patrick Corbin here. But we'll start with the maybe two safer SP2 options that I think you can make a case for in cash games. So we have Andrew Heaney here at $7,800, and he can be a little up and down. I mean, if you're looking at his game log, he'll have a great game, okay game, bad game, a good game. It's just kind of back and forth for the most part, but only a 3.54 implied team total against him here. In the Indians, while I am an Indians fan, I can't admit they're not the greatest team in the world. And if he can get past guys like Franmil Reyes, Jose Ramirez, and Jordan Luplow in this game, and I'm pretty sure Jordan Luplow got hurt last night, so I'd be interested to see if he's in the lineup today. I've not seen any updates on that, but I'm pretty sure he had the day-to-day sign at some point yesterday. I kind of fell asleep before that game ended, although I did get to see the Shohei Ohtani homer, which is near his head, and I mean, the guy's just an absolutely phenomenal player, really fun to watch. But yeah, anyway, Andrew Heaney here versus the Indians. So they're not striking out a lot versus lefties, but they're not really doing too much damage versus them either. As you can see, they only have a 75 WRC plus, below a 280 on base percentage, below a 280 WOBA. 10% walk rate's pretty good, and only a 21% K rate, so it's not like they're an awful team versus lefties, but Andrew Heaney's a guy that does have some strikeout upside. Now, he will give up homers, and that's a problem, and he does give up a little bit of hard contact and some fly balls. I mean, if you're looking at his numbers since last season, he does have a 40% fly ball rate and a 35% hard contact rate. And those numbers aren't terrible, but it's something to worry about a little bit in the back of your mind. But it's not something I would really fade the guy over because he does have a nice 28% K rate. So I think Heaney's fine at $7,800. Maybe not my most favorite matchup in the world versus Cleveland, but I don't think it's terrible for the price tag. Jameson Taillon, $7,400. I like the matchup better for him versus the Rangers. It's just, from what I saw from Garrett Cole last night, I just have a little bit of concern here for Jameson Taillon in case they could do the same thing to him, because I don't think the strikeouts will be there like Garrett Cole to kind of save his day, because Garrett Cole only had, 9 points, which was crazy versus the Rangers. His worst game of the season. Just makes absolutely no sense that he'd have his worst game of the year versus the Rangers, but I guess that's baseball sometimes, and things like that happen. Didn't even get the win, which almost felt like a near lock, but hey, it just happens sometimes, unfortunately. But Jameson Taillon here, $7,400. I think he can be an okay play here versus the Rangers. I think he could get us around 15 to 18 points, which would suffice at a mid 7K price point. 4 implied team total against him. Decently heavy favorite here, 5K prop as well. And looking at his numbers dating back to last season, that's a smaller sample size, 33 inning sample size, but he's got a 5.4 ERA, which looks pretty bad, but the underlying numbers are a lot better with a 3.58 xFIP and a 3.13 SIERA, over a 30% K rate, not really walking many guys, 11 Ks per 9 and only 2 walks per 9. Can give up some fly balls, but I think Jameson Taillon should be fine here in a pretty solid matchup versus the Rangers, who are striking out at a near 28% clip versus righties. Now, they do have some pop in their bat versus righties, and they will walk quite a bit, but if he can limit those and get those strikeouts, maybe get like 6-8 strikeouts and pick up the win, I think that'd be a pretty good day for Jameson Taillon at his price point. And I know the Yankees didn't do anything last night, neither did Garrett Cole, but it's another good spot here versus Fulte, and they do currently have the highest implied team total on the slate, so as long as the Yankees can bounce back here, I think Taillon will be fine. And then if you want to get into some really risky options here, we have Patrick Corbin and Kris Bubic. I think that's how you say his last name. I don't think it's Bubic. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but either way, he's only $4,000, so he doesn't have to do much for us. But we'll start with Patrick Corbin. So he's the other guy that can be very, very iffy. I think he had 32 points in his last game. I know he's certainly not the same pitcher that he once was. Dating back to last season, he has less than a 20% K rate, walk rate above 7%, 153 ISO given up. Does get some ground balls still, 32% hard contact rate and over a homer per 9. So I wouldn't say it's terrible, but it's still kind of hard to trust, especially with the one time I rostered him. I think he had negative 20 points, and he just could not get out of the first inning versus, I don't remember who that game was against. Was it the Cardinals? I want to say it was the Cardinals. I can't remember exactly though. But either way, $6,100 for a guy that could get you 15 points is not terrible. The Cubs have actually been solid versus lefties this year. They are striking out, though, which I know Patrick Corbin hasn't been a big strikeout guy, though I do believe he had 9 strikeouts in his last game. Now, again, it wasn't against the same team, so it's kind of hard to put too much into that. But they are striking out at a 27.7% clip versus lefties this year. Now, the other numbers are not that encouraging for Patrick Corbin because they're walking a lot. They're actually hitting for a good amount of power versus lefties, and that makes sense because they got guys like Wilson Contreras, Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, even though the guy's a strikeout machine. So they definitely do have some pop versus left-handed pitching, but they will strike out quite a bit. So if you're just banking on maybe some strikeouts here, a couple runs given up, $6,100, I do think the Nationals are a pretty good stack versus Zach Davies today. So if he could get that win, that would go a long way for him. So it's a very risky play. I'm not sure I'd recommend him in cash games, but if you really need a cheap pitcher today to make an expensive stack work, I don't hate Patrick Corbin. And the same thing goes for Kris Bubic here. I'm mainly just trying to find some cheap strikeouts for the most part. And he's dirt cheap, $4,000. You can't get any cheaper than that for a starting pitcher. So as long as he doesn't get absolutely blown up, if he gets 10 to 14 points, I think you would take that at $4,000 all day. And the Milwaukee Brewers are a team where it's kind of similar to the Chicago Cubs, where they've had a good amount of power versus lefties this year. I'd prefer if Bubic was a righty versus them, because versus righties, they've had virtually no power and they're doing pretty much nothing. they're striking out slightly less versus righties, but the overall numbers are pretty bad. Now versus lefties, they're striking out more with a near 29% K rate, but they're walking at 11% walk rate. ISO close to 200 on base percentage at nearly 350, and some kind of scary numbers here for Bubic. But if he can just limit just getting murdered here, and he can just get a handful of strikeouts and just kind of cruise for like five or so innings, that's not terrible. And he's only got a 4.32 implied team total against him. Obviously, he's an underdog going up against Brandon Woodruff. I don't think he's going to pick up the win here, but if he can get 5 Ks and he gives up like 2 runs, goes 5 innings, I think you'd take that at $4,000, especially if you're using him to get an expensive stack and they happen to just absolutely go off today. It could work out. If you're looking at his numbers, he's got a 21% K rate, 3.73 ERA. Underlying numbers a little bit worse, 4.53 xFIP, 4.68 SIERA, but it's mainly just a YOLO play for the most part. Would I recommend playing Bubic in cash? Probably not. Probably not. It seems a bit risky to me. I kind of want secure pitchers in cash games because I just don't like taking these unnecessary risks. But if you want to get absolutely nuts today, I do think Chris Bubic is a halfway okay, decent option, to put it lightly. But with that being said, I think that's it for the pitching, so let's move right on to the bats. And as per usual, we'll start with the catcher position, move around the diamond, hit the outfield as well. And as I always say in my videos, keep in mind things can change throughout the day. Some guys will not make the lineup, some guys will change spots in the order. Like yesterday, I like Larry Garcia at second base quite a bit. He ended up hitting near the bottom of the order, and Nick Madrigal ended up hitting in the top of the order. So I kind of switched my stances on those. Now Garcia still did fine, but I really like Madrigal since he was hitting near the top, and he obviously had a 30-point day. Not that anyone was expecting 30 points out of Madrigal, but that's just something to keep in mind throughout the day that I do update things, and you can find that on the spreadsheet throughout the day. But anyway, up top, we'll start with Gary Sanchez here, $5,300 if you are spending up for a catcher. I personally don't see myself getting up to Gary Sanchez today, but if you are full stack in the Yankees, he's been hitting okay recently. We always know he's got power in his bat. Now he hits for a low average, will strike out quite a bit, but Folty is a guy I think we can pick on for the most part. If you're just looking at his game log, he kind of gets hit pretty much every single day. Now, sometimes he doesn't get blown up or anything. He's not the worst pitcher in the world, but he'll definitely give some hits, and the Yankees got plenty of power in their bat. You got Gary Sanchez, Aaron Judge, Gio Urshela, Luke Voigt's back. Giancarlo Stanton's unfortunately on the IL, so you won't have him in the lineup, which does hurt the overall lineup. Also, Gleyber Torres is out as well, even though he's not hitting homers at all these days. But still like some power here versus Mike Folty, and they have a team total close to 5 here. Now, maybe that total lowers as the day progresses. We saw that yesterday with the Yankees where they were close to 5. When I did my video, then they went down to 4-6, I believe. I think it's because they closed the roof, which obviously going to hurt the offense a little bit. So that's something to kind of keep in mind to look out for throughout the day. But I do like the Yankees here quite a bit. Folty, not an amazing pitcher. Not complete trash or anything. If you're looking at his numbers since last season, 5.4 ERA, 4.78 xFIP, 4.52 SIERA, 20% K rate. Like, the guy's not terrible, but the one thing he does struggle with is giving up power, as he has given up over a 300 ISO and a 39% hard contact rate with over 2.5 homers per 9. So he doesn't profile that well versus the New York Yankees. So I think they're definitely a pretty solid bounce back stack today. Manny Pina, I talked about liking Bubic today, but I'm not naive enough to think he's going to come out here, throw 10 Ks, and have a no-hitter or anything. So I think some of these righties in Milwaukee are fine plays. And if Bubic actually ends up getting ownership today, it might even just make sense to stack against him, to be honest. Guys like Manny Pina, Avisel Garcia, Lorenzo Cain, I think would all be halfway decent, cheap righty plays versus Bubic here, because the guy's not the greatest pitcher out there. And it's a small sample size for Manny Pina this season, but he does have a 263 ISO, and obviously he hits lefties better than he does versus righties, so I think he's fine. Then Denny Jansen, $2,400, playing in that sandbox that Toronto calls a stadium in Florida right now. Nobody gets a lefty. I think he's fine. Obviously, the numbers suck for Denny Jansen this year, but he's kind of been heating up recently. He did have a negative WRC plus a couple weeks ago, and now he's finally in the positive, so we'll give him that. But just a cheap righty on lefty matchup for a team that's playing in an elementary school stadium, it seems like. Then dropping out of first base, we have Luke Voigt, $5,200. There was a couple of guys I wanted to pick here. I was thinking about Pete Alonso. He's going up against a lefty, a brand new lefty, so I figured that might be a decent spot. I don't think the Mets are a bad stack today. I don't think they have a team total out yet, but it would not surprise me if it's pretty high versus Tucker Davidson in Atlanta. I was also thinking about Shohei Ohtani, but I just put him in the outfield. So I landed on Luke Voigt here, $5,200 versus Folty for reasons I already mentioned earlier. The guy gives up a ton of power, a lot of hard contact, and a lot of homers. So Luke Voigt, definitely a guy that does profile well versus Folty. Then G-Man Choi, $3,600. He is recently back, and I had to imagine these Rays are going to be very popular today. In my opinion, they're the best stack to use. I know Matt Harvey hasn't been a complete trash can this year. He's definitely improved, but he's still not the greatest pitcher out there. We can definitely use lefties and righties versus him, but I do prefer lefties. That's where he really struggled, and we really can't look at the numbers for Choi because he has four plate appearances this year, but just to make it look really good, he's batting .750 with a .250 ISO and a .407 WRC+. Now again, you can't use a 4 plate appearance sample size on anything, but he does have some decent numbers versus righties, and should here in the top of the order for, in my opinion, the best stack on the slate, like G-Man Choi quite a bit. Then Josh Bell, $3,300. I'm not sure how popular Washington's going to be yet today. I guess it'll kind of depend on what kind of total they get, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's close to 5 here. Zach Davies isn't a great pitcher. Now, the wind in Wrigley doesn't look like it's blowing out or anything. Doesn't look like it's blowing in either. Kind of looks like it's going across the field, so it's pretty neutral for hitting and pitching. But I think the Nationals are a decent stack today. Josh Bell hits righties fine. Trey Turner's great versus whatever you want to throw at him. He's just one of the better players in all of baseball. Kyle Schwarber's got pop versus righties, also playing his old team. He homered last night, so that's just another good narrative. And then the other guy I was thinking about was Juan Soto, obviously. I mean, you can't forget about Juan Soto or Trey Turner. I know he's expensive, but I think those guys do make a decent stack tonight versus Zach Davies. And DJ LeMahieu dropping down to second base. You could also play him at third base. I have a hard time playing LeMahieu, especially today at $5,600. Yes, I like the matchup versus Folty. It's just, he doesn't have much power, and guys that are nearly $6,000, I want power upside. And so far this season, he's got a 0.9 ISO, which obviously I think that's going to come up, but I just don't think he's going to repeat the power he's had the past couple of seasons, so I'm not really looking to play LeMahieu too much, maybe outside a full-on Yankee stack, and that's only if I'm playing really cheap pitchers like Corbin or Bubic today, where I'm probably going to get the LeMahieu. I'd rather save a little bit of money and go with a guy like Brandon Lau. I know he's expensive, but he's got some decent pop versus righties, and even Jose Peraza is dirt cheap here, should be in the middle of the order for the Mets versus the lefties, so I'm having a hard time getting the LeMahieu here, but if you are full stack in the Yankees, I think he's fine. High batting average guy, doesn't really strike out too much. Brandon Lau here, $5,100 though. You're 200 ISO this season. Those numbers do improve when you look at versus righties. So I do like targeting lefties against Matt Harvey, but I think you can use all the Rays here. And massive park upgrade for the Rays, going from the Trop to Camden Yards, one of the best hitting parks in baseball, from one of the worst hitting parks in baseball. So massive park upgrade here, as you can see in the park factor ratings here. They have a nice shade of green here. And I mean, I just think all the Rays make sense. The Orioles bullpen's not the greatest here. Camden Yards is a very hitter-friendly park, and you get those guaranteed ninth inning at bats as well. So you can sign me up for all the Rays for the most part. And then Peraza, while he doesn't have great numbers, Tucker Davidson, brand new pitcher. So I'm gonna side with not the Yankees, the New York wrong New York team. I'm gonna side with the Mets here versus Tucker Davidson. And then dropping down to third base, we have Gio Urshela, $4,800, just another Yankees bat versus Mike Folty. I don't think we have to really get too in-depth there, but he's been fine this year, batting close to 300 with a 165 ISO and a 457 slugging. Not amazing numbers, but again, like some power upside here versus Folty. Joey Wendell, $4,500, kind of like the great value brand version of Brandon Lau here, but I think he's fine. He's also eligible at shortstop as well, and I just like pretty much all the lefties versus Matt Harvey, and I like pretty much all the Rays, not even just the lefties. And then Jonathan VR, $3,300, should be hitting near the top of the order. Kevin Pillar got a pitch right to the face yesterday. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but when I was looking at some highlights this morning, I just saw blood gushing from his face, and I saw he had to go to the hospital to get a CT scan, so hopefully he's okay. I did not see an update on that, but it's going to bump some guys around in the order, because typically versus lefties, Kevin Pillar would get a decent spot, so now that he's out, I'm thinking Jonathan VR should be fine here near the top of the order. He's got some speed, and while he doesn't have the most power in the world, his numbers aren't overly impressive this year. So I think he's a fine option here versus the rookie pitcher. Then going down to shortstop, we have Trey Turner, $6,000. I know he's super expensive, so it's going to be hard to get to him. But if you are stacking the Nationals, you can't leave off Trey Turner. This guy's got power. He hits for a high average. He's got all the speed in the world. Versus Zach Davies, not a great pitcher. I think you can definitely use Trey Turner in all the Nationals tonight. Bo Bichette, $5,600. I don't like picking on Erod. I mean, the guy's a fine pitcher, but when you're in this stadium where there's just so many runs are scored almost every single time they're here, and they have a team total close to 5. If we were at any other park, maybe besides Coors Field or something, I don't think Erod's going to have this high of a team total against him. But I do like Bo Bichette here. The guy's got power. He's got speed. Hits for a decently high average. So you can definitely sign me up for Bo Bichette, one of the more fun players in baseball. Then Frankie Lindor, $4,700. Yes, I am a little bit salty. He did leave the Indians. I totally get it for monetary purposes, but it still hurts the fan inside me a little bit. But I know he hasn't been great this year, but $4,700 should be hitting to the top of the order. If not the top of the order here versus a lefty, I prefer him versus righties, but I think the Mets stack's actually an okay spot tonight, so I don't hate Frankie at $4,700. Plus, the cheap shortstops weren't looking super impressive to me today, so it looks like it's going to be a spend-up position for me as of right now. That could obviously change when we get lineups out, but as of right now, looking like a good spend-up spot. And dropping down to the outfield, we got a lot of good options here. If you're spending top dollar, Aaron Judge and Juan Soto look like good options. It's really just who you're stacking. If you're stacking the Yankees, you're going to want to put Aaron Judge in there. If you're stacking the Nationals, you're going to want to put Juan Soto in there, some of the better players in baseball. Aaron Judge, love the power upside versus Folty. I think that's one of the best home run spots in the entire slate. He crushes righties, he crushes lefties, doesn't really matter. Juan Soto's great versus right-handed pitching. I do like the National stack today. Probably going to be a bit lower owned. I think a lot of people are going to go with probably like the Yankees today, and I could definitely see the Rays being very popular. So maybe the Nationals get a little bit overlooked, especially at these price tags of Trey Turner and Juan Soto, very expensive. So I could see them going a little bit overlooked or just underplayed, maybe not overlooked. I think people recognize it's a good stack. I'm just not sure how many people are actually going to stack them up. Randy Arena, $5,000, pretty much like all the Rays here versus Matt Harvey. Nothing I haven't talked about already. Shohei Ohtani, $4,900. Zach Plesac's on a bad pitcher. Not really trying to pick on him too much, but Shohei Ohtani is just, I mean, the guy is one of the best players in baseball right now. He's got the most homers. He's got a 2.10 ERA. That's what they said. Leads the league in homers. I mean, the guy's just absolutely phenomenal. So far this season, he's batting .263 with a .349 ISO and a .612 slugging. Now, obviously, his numbers are way better versus righties than they are versus lefties, even though he did homer off a lefty last night. But yeah, Shohei Ohtani, I mean, if you just want to play him every day, I think it makes sense. I'm not sure why he's still below $5,000. He should probably be closer to $6,000 to be honest. So you just want to take the discount there. Don't hate Ohtani. Also eligible at first base. Kyle Schwarber, $4,000. If you're stacking up the Nationals, he has some decent pop versus right-handed pitching. So I think Kyle Schwarber is a fine play. Austin Meadows at $3,800. He's probably going to be the chalkiest bat in the entire slate. I can definitely get behind that. He's got a .246 ISO this season. Obviously, he's got better numbers versus righties than he does versus lefties. And looking at Austin Meadows' splits versus righties, .295 ISO, 148 WRC+, 543 slugging, walking at a 12% clip with a 56% fly ball rate. So that's a great ratio compared to 26% ground ball rate. So he's lifting the ball, good amount of hard contact. Austin Meadows is pretty much the best play in the entire slate, in my opinion. You get the park upgrade, the guaranteed ninth inning at bats, hits near the top of the order, and for my opinion, the best stack on the entire slate. Jordan Luplow, if he's in the lineup today, he's facing a lefty that does have fly ball tendencies, and we'll give some hard contact in homer, so I don't hate Luplow, but prefer Heaney than the Indians bats for the most part. Jerry Kelenic, $2,900. He'll be popular once again because he continues to be dirt cheap, even though that guy's definitely got a bright future ahead of himself. And I do prefer the lefties versus Spencer Turnbull, so don't mind Kelenic. Then Brett Gardner, $2,700. If you want a cheap Yankees bat, you get the lefty-on-righty matchup here versus Folty. I think he makes sense for cheap if you can't afford these expensive Yankees bats and you do want exposure to them. But with that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. You can follow me over on social media. I'm at ChrisPennell16 on Twitter and CPenn16 over on IG. And if you want to help support the channel, over on Patreon, get access to some extra content. Link is down below for that, for the projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff. Link is down below. And I do cover other sports as well. So if you want to join the community, feel free to do that. But with that being said, I'm going to get up here. Hope you guys enjoy the wonderful weather today. If it's nice where you are, I think it's going to be sunny here, so I'll be getting a tan while I'm working on baseball stuff all day and NASCAR. I'll stop rambling, and I'll see you guys in the next video.